So I'm just glad to be here with you guys in my space and invite you here so that we can have a real candid conversation. I got my chat up so I can interact with you guys. I'm gonna keep up with as much of those questions and comments as best I can. But like Ms. Rashonda said, I am a licensed therapist. I like to call myself a licensed mental health and wellness professional homegirl because I don't consider myself the average therapist. And I think now that counseling has become more popular, a lot of us are kind of coming into our own professionally so that the image that we see of counselors are not like the stick in the mud that have a pen in the pad while you're sitting on the couch. That's not what counseling is, at least for me. I like to kick my feet up, kind of eat a snack or two while I'm in session, maybe some gummy bears. I saw somebody said something about gummy bears earlier. And then really make someone feel comfortable as best I can, as best as someone would allow me to be able to do that as I hold space for them or their families. So I'm going to invite you guys to do the same. You may be in your PJs, you may not be. I don't know. As long as you are comfortable, I'm hoping that we can have an open, candid discussion about some pretty tough things because I wanted to share with you guys the most common issue that I see coming through the door when I'm doing therapy is anxiety. And so I really wanted to talk more about that today and really kind of give you language for what that really means for people your age, because we are born with this human condition in this world with stressors that are going to lead to what anxiety is and how it affects us. It affects our families. There are so many triggers, which really could literally be anything. And I really just wanted to make sure you are able to recognize it off top. So I guess we can kind of move forward to the next slide. And we can talk about a couple of the main things that are going on right now in the world that I wanted to kind of touch on as far as anxiety. And that is 2020. This is just a fun meme I saw. I thought it was funny. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sesame Street. It's been on for a million years. And this is their rendition, or somebody's rendition. It's not really Sesame Street, but it speaks so much truth to me. So I want to know if you guys in the chat would kind of let us all know, what are those triggers for anxiety for you? We're going to define what anxiety is. I think everyone most commonly knows what that means. And I'll go ahead and throw it out here. That is mainly worry. And we're going to break it down. But what would make someone worry? What are those things that come up for you in your life or in the lives of people you know that would to people feeling worried? Bad grades for sure. Yes, thank you, Logan. Not in control of a situation. The unknown. And the meme is super real, Daniel. Yes. Worrying about your kids when the internet messes up right before the event, that is super triggering, right? A huge life change, all these shifts, right? And the funny thing about life is that we don't get to control, which is what someone said, when these changes happen. And failing at a test definitely is something that's going to shoot my anxiety up, especially when you have certain goals for yourself, certain things you want to accomplish. And someone says they're diagnosed with GAD, and we're going to talk about GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, and sexual trauma, past events, and that is my jam. I talk about trauma all day, every day, and I am going to give you guys a clue into how these different symptoms of anxiety do coincide directly with PTSD symptoms. You guys know what PTSD is? Somebody shoot in there for me if you know what that is. What does PTSD stand for? Because anxiety is a symptom of PTSD. So people bringing up thoughts of your past, yes. Post-traumatic stress disorder, that's what PTSD is. When people bring up your past and throw things in your face, that is super stressful, right? Because it triggers so many thoughts. So thank you guys for that. For the sake of time, we're gonna keep it moving. But I wanted to just kind of see what you guys, y'all are on it. Y'all know what post-traumatic stress disorder is. That's dope. So we can move on to the next slide, where really I'm just going to give you guys a couple of things that are really affecting each and every one of us in so many different ways. So if you've already seen some of my presentation, by no means is it the same, but this is something that I shared last time, which is the coronavirus. Obviously, COVID has changed and shifted so many things that we have going on in our world, whether that is professionally for adults. There are people who are laid off, people who are furloughed, meaning they still have their job, but they're not getting paid because, frankly, the business can't afford to pay them. There are worries going on with you guys. Drop them in the chat. How has Corona affected your life as students? I know that your parents and the people taking care of you, the people you love, are also affected by COVID. So I just want to get an idea of what you guys are experiencing as far as how COVID does stress you out. Because believe me, it stressed me out. I would talk about myself. I am currently locked away in my office after just trying to rush and get my son's, my 3-year-old's lunch together because I have been home with my family 4 months and I know I'm not the only one. So not knowing how to plan, your dad almost got COVID. So obviously there's the things that are implied, right? You do have those concerns health wise. Um, I'm not learning as much as I would have if I was in school page, and that's huge. So it's really kind of, you're making me think of how we kind of take things for granted, right? So we think about how we're just so tired of it. We don't want to be there, but now we're missing our friends. We're missing karate. We are not traveling as much as we used to. So this slow down process has really given us a chance to be in our heads, right? And so if we're in our heads and our narrative is going and it's racing, that is part of anxiety. And so going back to school is going to be a huge shift. I think a lot of what people are not realizing is even now when I'm planning for my 9-year-old to go back to school is really difficult to even know what are we going to do. Are we going to let him go back to school to 4th grade? He's really excited about having 2 different teachers and switching classes, but now that he's not going back to school or we don't even know how is that going to look. Getting tired of seeing the same 4 walls, Jeremiah, definitely. And I would agree that that's some of the things, right? So then also with our numbers kind of spiking because the numbers are, people aren't wearing masks when they go out. They're tired of wearing them. They may not have access to them. Some people may not take it as seriously. So as the world is slowly opening up and there are these new rules and basically a new way of life, I mean, just imagine if you guys have lived 15, 16, 17, 34 years of living life without wearing a mask. Now we have this whole shift in perspective in how we have to do things. And yes, definitely conspiracies. What do you follow? What news is real? What news is fake? So these are all things that we are feeding ourselves daily, right? On our social media timelines, on the news, on our favorite shows, on our commercials even. You see Papa John's commercial I just saw, and even like a Universal Studios commercial where we were supposed to take a trip, my family and me, this winter into Disney World. But I mean, now we're just seeing, is it going to be as fun? All the things you might have had planned, like someone said earlier, your goals kind of falling through. So the next slide, I also wanted to bring up something else that's been going on that's really kind of rocked our world, right? And we're talking about symptoms of anxiety. So there was an article read out of Psychology Today. This quote is talking about how this is directly affecting people your age, right? And so we're talking about being good leaders at this summit, right? You guys are in this program for a reason. You want to cultivate those skills to be able to relate to people, to be amazing leaders in your family, among your peers, to really be successful. And then you're hit with this huge thing where really the major leaders that we even look up to at some points, they're even confused because these are unprecedented times. So research has been done based on how COVID affects teenagers. And so this is for families, friends, everybody to really kind of realize that there are going to be increases in those symptoms in the way that we feel when we come to talking about overwhelming emotions. So of course, it's going to be more depression symptoms. You're going to feel more down, kind of out of your skin, not really knowing what to do. Anxiety symptoms, which we're talking about today, of course, those increase. And then experiencing loss of community. So someone talked a little bit earlier in the chat about, not being able to go to karate. I'm a Sunday school leader at my church, and there was a lot of talk about a lot of the young men in that group. They play baseball, so they pretty much lost their whole season. A friend of mine, husband, he coaches a soccer team at his school, and they lost out on their season for the rest of the year in the spring, and they were like I think the state champs. I don't know what district that was, but somewhere over there near like Lexington, state champs. The girls soccer team, they were supposed to win. And so this is also alluding to, and yes, Paige, you can't play softball anymore. And these are things that we tell you to do or to consider when it comes to managing your anxiety, right? So we say, hey, go for a walk or go play ball, go get that aggression out. And now it's like, crap, I can't even do that. What am I supposed to do? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today as far as how to even manage anxiety too, because again, loss of control, all that's been taken away. So we go to the next slide, then now we're going to talk a little bit more about another subject that has been on the news, of course. In addition to trying to figure out what's going on with Corona, how that affects our lives and things. We also have the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been around for a while, but of course, there's been a spike in the social climate regarding racism, right? So, of course, this affects each and every one of us, right, in some form. So, this is about really kind of calling together, okay, we have this pandemic, we're stuck in our houses, we're freaked out, we don't know what to do. And now we're in this space where there's a cycle, where I actually spoke to someone who just got her PhD. And as it regards to racism and kind of Jim Crow era and segregation and everything, how she studied the cycle of how things kind of blow up in our history when it comes to this subject, right? So there is going to be increased anger, anxiety, and confusion among you and your peers. There's a lot to process, especially if you've lived like you guys have for the last 15, 16, 17 years, just kind of living a certain way of life, not really noticing, the racial tension. Your generation certainly has different views about what racism looks like. Some people don't even believe it affects them and may not directly, but there are so many different nuances as far as how this even affects people. And there are differences. We have to talk about the differences between Black and white students. And so I did do some research and wanted to point out, just because this article talked about Black kids and their counterparts, there is a huge difference between Black and white students, because Black students in this particular article are having very specific conversations about how to stay alive when it comes to interacting with police. And I know that you guys have had some talks with Leon Lott and the Sheriff's Department and how we're doing that as a community here. But it's just really important to point out that if you are a non-Black student and you have friends who are Black, really understanding that struggle, and then vice versa, having those conversations. There are allies who are out there who are trying to help people in my community because, spoiler alert, I'm Black too. But what really hit me in this particular article I was reading in preparation for today was the fact that there is a certain value of life that is a burden for Black students. Unfortunately, if you're seeing on the news that, an execution basically of someone's life who was Black for just kind of hanging around and being Black, and George Floyd is one of obviously a long list of names, unfortunately, then you start to value, do I even matter? My husband and I do not keep this kind of stuff from our kid, because it's important for him to know what's going on. We don't show him the news because I do believe it is triggering. And I want him to be able to look at things appropriate for his age. But one of the things that my 9-year-old asked me once we told him about George Floyd was, am I next? Because we told him, he asked what George Floyd did, or what the other names on the list, we were talking about them too, what they did. And literally for sitting at home playing a video game with your niece or nephew, got someone shot. And so it really was important for us to start to help him kind of build a good foundation of who he is. This is how we are helping him early learn how to manage his anxiety, because clearly he was worried, if I go to the park or if I ride my bike, which he just learned how to do around my neighborhood, am I going to be safe? And so it starts really early, you guys. As far as the messages that we take in about anxiety, they start really early, because we start to learn what to trust, who keeps us safe, who doesn't. And I'm not just talking about external triggers like you guys were naming earlier. I'm thinking about, again, going back to the value of one's life, the internal triggers. Am I even worth it? Those are the really hard, ugly questions that come up in therapy. And they do come up earlier than what people like to say. So you guys are really at a great age where you can sit with this early and learn what this looks like in your life, so that you can start to manage the emotions. And so if we go to the next slide, what we've talked about so far are two major things. All this stuff kind of jumbled together, right? You guys talked about all the different stresses you have in life, the overwhelmingness of it all, right? And so those are just two major things. I just thought it was important for us to kind of bring to the forefront and see how it just contributes to anxiety. So we can go to the next slide, so that we can really talk about what happens next, which is really just acknowledging what anxiety is. So the DSM-5 is a book. It's like the counselor Bible that we use as therapists to diagnose people with certain conditions, right? And so this is a list of symptoms, and someone actually mentioned it earlier. Do you guys know what these symptoms are related to? What diagnosis is this? is kind of what we're talking about today. It's generalized anxiety disorder. So I put it in terms for you guys to be able to. I'm trying to read Jeremiah's comment, but I can't do two things at once. But I definitely want to come back to what you're saying, Jeremiah. I wanted to put these terms in phrases that you would understand, right? So feeling like we're going to snap on somebody. That is what we call in the DSM irritability when you're on edge. Do y'all know that song? Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. Now that's been remixed a couple times over the years, right? So I don't know if I'm dating myself, but that song is talking about irritability, right? Wanting to stay away from people, being isolated, super paranoid. When someone is kind of, especially now with COVID, do I even talk to this person? Do I look at this person? Do I shake their hand? All the things that we know how to do and we're supposed to do to be polite, shaking someone's hand, now it's kind of risky, right? So I'm really paranoid about that. Or am I walking around my neighborhood while Black? Am I going to be stopped? Like those are all things that contribute to hypervigilance or being paranoid. So one of the things here is not trusting enough. Losing interest in things that we used to enjoy, which is also a symptom of depression. When usually, let's say you used to go play ball with your boys or whatever, you used to kick it and now you don't go anymore because maybe, and this is how the symptoms overlap, you're paranoid to go out and play ball anymore. And so now we're thinking about how these symptoms impact your life. Normally you would function one way, but now it's changed because of the way that you feel. And Jeremiah was saying something about the new things are hard to deal with because a lot of change happens so fast. That is a great point and a great segue into even how these symptoms look. Now, these are actually really rooted in a lot of the anxiety symptoms here, but this is PTSD. Like this official bullet list is PTSD. Because what Jeremiah's comment just reminded me of is the fact that when trauma happens, which is a huge event that just overwhelms our emotions, overwhelms our body systems, it's really just too much happening so too fast. And so these symptoms you guys can read for yourself. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I really wanted you guys to see what PTSD looks like because anxiety is closely related. So let's talk about what generalized anxiety disorder is, GAD. We can go to the next slide because again, change happens when we actually get to acknowledge things, right? So generalized anxiety disorder, again, a list of things I am not going to read to you because I know you guys know how to, but you see irritability there. You can see the trouble sleeping, which is something else I wanted to point out, because if you are questioning whether or not you are in a decent space, then it's important for you to kind of know how things look different. So check in on how you're sleeping. I know my sleep cycle is super off. I'm staying up way later than usual. Are you not sleeping as much or are you sleeping too much? So we have to kind of look at those subtle changes. How am I eating? Am I eating too much? Because sometimes food does give us comfort, or are you eating because you're bored? Are you eating because you're trying to hide certain feelings to feel better? Are you super anxious and all you can do is kind of keep snacking all day? How do you feel when you are in public? Some people are in public now and they start to notice that, I don't feel as comfortable. Again, going back to the two things we talked about earlier with Black Lives Matter movement and the coronavirus, being in public is just kind of triggering period for most people more than others. And so excessive worrying or tension. I want to point that out too, that it's not just, oh, I'm concerned, I don't know if I should go do this thing or not. Excessive worrying means it really takes up a large amount of your headspace in your head. So if you're worried about that test so much to the point where you didn't even study because you was worried, then I would say you might need to pause and try to address that. Or are you worried about what someone is thinking of you, how they are talking about you? You guys have the burden, unfortunately, of being in a generation where so many people have access to you. So bullying goes way further than what it did when I was in school. So you have cyber bullies, as they call it, or Twitter thugs, or whatever y'all call them now. You have all these worries and concerns about maybe an image. So someone who's on social media pretty actively, are you worried about how you look all the time? And is that impacting the way you interact with others? The next slide I wanted to pull up is really important because I really wanted to harp on the physical manifestation of stress and anxiety. This is really, really important because one of the symptoms of anxiety is we ask, do you feel tension in your body, right? So I actually was scrolling through my timeline. I follow a lot of counseling pages and positive inspirational pages and things like that. And there's one that said, stop, Remember to relax your jaw and relax your shoulders. Because most commonly, we find that our tension is in our shoulders. We find that it's in our jaw. So I don't know if anyone can relate or agree, but I do have some clients clients who will say, I grind my teeth in my sleep. I don't know if anybody in the chat can let me know if they've heard that before, or if they do that, or they just notice that they clench their hands or their jaw. Then yes, that would be a sign of anxiety, right? So yes, Paige said her mom does. So one of the things I want y'all to point out is even if you're not really sure if you are dealing with anxiety, which spoiler alert, we all do. It's just the degree to which you are actually experiencing anxiety, right? So if you're not really sure if emotionally you're dealing with anxiety, then pay attention to what your body says, right? So if you are feeling kind of tight, that's what tension is. And you notice one of my friends was like, "Girl, I wear my shoulders as earrings. My stuff's so tight." She walking around like this and don't even know, right? And so, ooh, Don, that sounds very painful. She said he or she cracked a few teeth. Anxiety is real. So if you notice that you are more sore, then that will be a clue to kind of pause and say, hey, am I anxious or am I worried about something? I heard something on a show earlier. Then, the Redding family says I go outside a lot so I don't explode. And that is where you can connect and try to get rid of some of that tension. But one of the things I heard on a show I was watching earlier last week was if someone is uncomfortable, we can use that as a clue, right? And that's a huge clue right here. And this is what I'm trying to point out is the fact that our body is going to tell us. So if I'm uncomfortable physically or emotionally, I need to learn more about that. That's a learning opportunity. So if I didn't used to really get headaches, then what is it that's changed in my life to make things super anxious? So I want to point out here a huge thing, and I'll share something personal with you guys. I was just diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Crohn's disease, and it's affecting my gut. You can go look it up and see. But there was a time when it was October of last year in 2019. I didn't know what the heck was going on in my body. Like my stomach I was digesting food really slowly and I could feel all of it and I was losing all this weight because I couldn't eat. And I was like, 2019 for me was trash. I mean, actually 2020 is doing pretty well for me, all things considered, but it was a lot. And as I thought more about it and I was learning more about Crohn's disease, I read that anxiety is a huge precursor to autoimmune diseases like Crohn's disease, which is what I have. So it affected the way I was eating, and it's terrible. I have it under control now. I just have to take a shot every 8 weeks. And so that's how I'm managing it, along with managing my stress, because I know that it is directly related to the way my body responded. So you guys again are at a great age to say, hey, I know if I'm not digesting as well, or if my heart is beating a little faster or irregularly, I might be anxious about something. So you need to use those clues. Going for walks is a great way to release natural endorphins. So not only does that help with anxiety, because everything's connected, you can really kind of manage your sadder symptoms or your depression as well. So those are just a few tips and things, and we can go on to the next thing. But I literally Googled anxiety in the body and came up with this slide because I really just wanted to show you guys that. We talked about trauma just a little bit. I wanted to make sure that I just made it clear a couple of important points when it comes to how trauma does look for the body or for what it does to us. So there are biological and emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional symptoms of trauma. Anxiety, again, is part of the PTSD list of symptoms. It's just too much happening too fast, right? And this is a funny picture I thought, just because I'm just like, you might have seen the memes that say, check on your strong friends. Just because someone looks to be okay, it's not necessarily true because we don't know what's going on internally. But there is a literal biological shift and change that happens when we are super stressed or when we go through a traumatic event. And so it's important for, again, us to know and pay attention to our bodies. Okay, that's so important. And so that's what I could do a whole talk on trauma. And normally I have an hour or two to even do something like this. So I hope I'm doing okay on time. But I just wanted to leave this with you so that we can kind of like make that connection between, traumatic events and anxiety. So we can go to the next slide too. So here I just wanted to, you guys have already kind of been doing this already. just talking about the coping skills, talking and listening. Yes, thank you, David. I hope I'm saying that right, David Devon. So here, you guys have already been talking about coping skills, right? I found this again on my best friend Google, an image to show you guys for self-care. So you guys type in the chat, let me know what you guys are already doing in order to address your self-care concerns when it comes to managing anxiety. So these are just a few different tools here. I know one of the things that's helped me lately, excuse me, I have been putting my phone on do not disturb during the day. I usually put it on like at 10 at night and it goes off, like comes back on, my notifications at 7 a.m. But I have been keeping it on all day, which has been so nice to unplug day 8. So you guys let me know what you guys have been doing or what ideas you like. Headspace, Claire, yes, that is a great app. I used Headspace when the world was open and we would do it in session. Headspace is a good app. It gives you guided meditations. A lot of people like the Calm app too. So you can put it on. If you don't want to take up space on your phone, like sometimes I run out, I just go to YouTube and type in guided meditation and you can find a free one. Upping the water intake, water is life. Gardening, which is a great way to address anxiety because anxiety basically says we've lost control, right? And so whether that's control of your thought or again, how your body is responding to the anxiety. And so gardening is a really great tool because you can control and see the fruits of your labor. So you get to control when you go out and water, when you get to go out and weed, all those things. Art is super powerful. You guys are giving me art in different mediums, whether you write or paint or draw. Origami, I could never learn how to do origami, Daniel. That is dope because again, you get to have something to do with your fingers. And sometimes people's anxieties will live in their fingers. And they may like bite their fingernails or they'll bounce their feet. You can't see it right now, but origami, gardening, painting, drawing, writing, like you guys are giving me some great examples, then you give your hands something to do. Learn how to bind books so that you can make your own books. And yes, Cassidy, that's a great hustle right there. Art is very calming, it's very grounding. So if we're talking about grounding activities, grounding meaning kind of bringing your body back together. So if we're going to talk about trauma and anxiety, for example, trauma has your body separate from itself. It's kind of like some people may experience, they will call it like an out-of-body experience. It's called disassociation in the DSM-5. But it's like when you don't feel like yourself, like you're kind of watching yourself do the things that you're doing or you zone out. And it's on a spectrum. Sometimes when we daydream, that counts as dissociation. So grounding is what we need to do to bring ourselves back together. So whether that means I'm going to paint and really kind of feel the brush on the canvas with each stroke. I may ground myself with some essential oils. And so I might go out literally with no shoes on in my backyard and put my feet like in the dirt to really remind myself of where I am. And yes, it can be kind of scary, Paige, when you have those out-of-body experiences and you don't really know where you are, what you're doing. You come out. Some people will say like blackouts. And yes, dissociation disorder in the book, DID, it's really concerning because you can hurt yourself or someone else. So if we're putting things into regular practice where we are doing mindfulness activities, we put on essential oils. I have an oil diffuser and I'll meditate and I'll have like the oils kind of going, my diffuser will kind of give me a scent and it kind of reminds me, okay, Christian, you're at home, it's July 15th, it's about 12:30, you're safe with your family. Sometimes we literally need those reminders that we're home. Now, this is a good question, and I guess we can shift to the next slide because we've already kind of touched on what I said anyway. Dizziness being a sign of anxiety, I would say yes. Absolutely. You might want to get that checked out and kind of, if you're noticing that your body is doing different things that it used to didn't do before, and you really want to kind of point out anxiety, then I would start making a record, taking a log of when those events happen. So if you're having dizzy spells, then start to write down when those happen and take note of the time of day, who you're with, what you're doing, what you're drinking, what you're eating, what you're not drinking, what you're eating, so that you can try to track what it is that may be contributing to the dizziness. So then okay, I usually get kind of dizzy right before I have to go do this assignment and do public speaking before school. that kind of shows you, hey, I'm kind of nervous about speaking in front of people, which is fear everybody says. And so maybe you'll know, okay, I need to take a deep breath when that happens, or I need to check in with myself every 3 hours in the day, breathe for like 3 minutes intentionally, and really kind of figure out what intervention you need. So someone asked what we can do if parents act like that anxiety is not a big thing. And that is a great question. If anyone has suggestions, throw them in the chat, because, I like to make stuff as interactive as I can. One of the things that I would do is perhaps do the functional analysis I was just talking about, which is that list, the log of things that you have going on. You might say, you know what, Mom, I've written down all these times that I start to feel a little anxious, or these are the times that I've noticed that I've started to be kind of different, and this is what's going on in my head. If you can kind of keep track of that and present evidence, if you're comfortable enough to share that with your parent, you can do that. You can also compare the GAD symptoms that we talked about earlier to how you've been feeling when that's changed, because if you can really articulate when that's happening for yourself, then you're making a great case for your parents, but also for yourself, so that you can kind of say things out loud and kind of take the power away from the anxiety. So that is, I think, a good question in an important way. One way you can try to make that real for your parents. One thing I will say as a parent myself, and having worked with parents, and I still do work with them, is that your parents are going through stuff too. And so when there's a huge shift in our climate, we talked about in the very beginning, people have things going on, and we can go to the next slide too, then it affects the entire family, like the whole dynamic, especially with us being in this space where we don't know what to do with these uncharted waters we're in. We don't even know how to do it. Daniel says he prays and it helps. Yes. That is definitely one of the things I do too, Daniel. So, I'm meditating, I'm praying, I'm writing, really getting into that mode of intentionally taking care of yourself. And I say to a lot of my moms, especially, have you taken care of yourself on purpose? Because, they'll say, I'm on autopilot, I don't know how to do that. And I'll find that, of course, we move like this so fast in life that we don't even slow down enough to say, I ain't even ate today. And I hear that a lot, and so what COVID has done is make us kind of slow down, and that gives us a chance to really kind of attend to our needs. But then sometimes we're slowing down now enough to where it's like, oh crap, like now I'm in my head. Because one of the things I didn't say earlier, which is a symptom of generalized anxiety, is the restlessness. So some people are so busy and doing all these things, and I'm involved in all this stuff, when really a lot of that may come from the fact that I want to be involved in all these things and be so busy so that I don't have to be in my head, because being in my head can be a scary place. So that's the restlessness piece, right? Like, are you busy because you're trying to avoid things? That is a huge clue to anxiety. So yes, autopilot. Thank you, Jennifer. That's the thing that I want to roll on. So this is the end of my presentation, clearly. Okay. So I'm open for questions if we have time. Ms. Prashanda, you let me know. I did my best to give you the quickest spiel that I could about anxiety. You guys have been great so far. I really appreciate it. You have some very insightful leaders here.
No, we definitely have time for questions.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
So feel free to either unmute yourself. I want you guys to feel comfortable unmuting yourself and asking your own question, or go ahead and type it in the group chat. But I know for one, while we're waiting for those questions to come in, it's just so helpful for me as an adult to really be able to say what I feel. Like, this is helping me understand some of my feelings. I shared with the 4-H Pinckney leaders back in April. I noticed that even myself, I started grinding my teeth, and I couldn't understand why that was happening, because I've never done that before. So being able to talk to you and, get some coping tools to be able to help me stop doing that. I'm still kind of clenching my jaw a little bit. So I'm trying to make sure that I stop doing that. But guys, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions now.
I do see Paige's, she made a comment about teachers saying that she's doing too much. And the comment about either I do too much or I'm not doing enough. And that's what we call in therapy black or white thinking. I see that so much, Paige, in some of the adult clients I treat, and they'll say, either I'm a boss or I'm not. Either I'm going to do this and I'm going to be known as doing all this stuff, or I'm just not. I'm not doing enough. So, and I'm not picking on you, but what I usually pull out of those sessions is I wonder if there is struggle to believe that you are enough. You've mentioned wasting time, like we have to have every minute of the day kind of plan type of thing. But I'm wondering if there's like a self-esteem, kind of value myself kind of thing going on there. Because our culture tells us that we have to do things with every moment, when really that's not fair to our health overall. But usually there's that narrative of, am I enough? Am I doing enough? Kind of going. I actually just got up a session right before joining y'all that said that. I see a question from Erica Jones.
Yeah, we have we have a question from Facebook Live. We are in some challenging times. What are some ways to make the most of these hard times?
It is our chance to be creative, guys. This is the fun time. So if it's about reframing stuff. So if there were things that you used to do that you're not able to do anymore, then this is your chance to exercise that creative muscle and say, okay, well, how can I get what I was getting out of that thing now, just in a different way? So this is a chance. Out of challenges, we know there's growth, right? So I think one of the examples is like, this is an easy example, but for people who like to go to the gym before, don't really go right now, they go for walks around the neighborhood. And then you start to appreciate nature. Like I was never an outside person, but that is how I made the best of my time. Is another point coming out of this comment is doing new things. So I don't like bugs and stuff, and that's just my thing. But I've really liked the natural air on my face when I go for a walk, and then I'm with my kids. So I'm kind of just enjoying new things. Is maybe trying something that you didn't do before. And another thing is to write about it. For sure, hands down, writing is one of the best ways that you can make the best of a situation. And you can write goals of things you can do after COVID, trying to give yourself some hope and really paint that picture for what things could be once we get everything under control. I hope that answers your question. There are so many ways to be able to do that. But the first thing I want you to get out of that is just reframing it and being creative with how you can do things differently.
All right. And so just some of the questions, not questions more so, but comments. Devon, I'm going to say Devon. I just wanted to add from my own perspective that a lot of people in South Carolina do not believe mental health is real, and it is a struggle when you don't have a support system.
Facts. And I think I was saying David. Sorry. Thank you for that, Rashonda. Devon.
I might have not gotten it right myself.
Okay. Let me know if I'm saying your name wrong.
I know.
But yeah, that's a real thing.
By the way.
What is it?
It's Devin.
Devin. Hey, Devin.
Hi.
Thank you, girl. So this is so true, straight up. And it's one of my missions as a therapist is to make sure that people know that mental health issues are absolutely real. And I think we're getting better in the field, seeing people come forward. Like my referrals are popping. Like I had to cut them off last week because COVID and Black Lives Matter, those two things, which is why I brought it up today, they've been bringing people to my phone left and right because people are like, yo, bro, like I used to be okay. And one of the things that I would say back to them is, I'm not really, maybe you weren't as okay as you thought, and again, this goes back to the busy, right? Like, were you so busy and caught up in doing your thing and being a boss and woo that you didn't even know that you were depressed or anxious? And depression and anxiety are the two common ones that everybody deals with, right? Depending on what degree, that's like, that's going to vary for everybody, but they present differently for everybody. Like in men, depression looks like anger and aggression. When really, if you have a friend that is aggressive or angry most of the time, then especially if they're a male, per research, they may be going through something. They may be depressed. So it's real, yes. And we just have to know how to recognize it, which is, this is just a great start to the conversation because it looks so different.
Absolutely. We have another question. I am beginning to deal with a lot of past trauma from when I was younger, and it's all bubbling to the surface. And frankly, it's beginning to cause some problems. I'm going to consider to start counseling, but do you think this would be a great outlet for someone dealing with trauma from the past?
Heck yeah, man. I deal with trauma every day, all day. I love it. And it's thank you for that question and being brave enough to even say that, first of all, because a lot of us don't want to say that we got trauma going on, right? And so shout out to you for first of all recognizing that it's an issue now that's affecting you today. And depending on the way that your therapist works, um, I offer, for example, consultations for people who call me. And so I use that as a chance for me to try to get hired for a job. So if you decide that you're not really sure if therapy should work, which is kind of, your question, or if you should go to therapy and figure it out, take your power back from jump, right? Do some research on what therapy looks like, what you want in a therapist, so that you are comfortable in even making that step. So if you, and I think I put my contact information up and Mr. Shana may put it in the chat, but if you want just some tips on good questions to ask a therapist, then I would help you out with that. I might actually do a video on that today on my IG. That's a really good question. But yes, the answer is yes, the therapist can help if they are trauma informed. I am both trauma informed and trauma specifically trained, meaning that I understand if someone doesn't do their homework, that might be avoidance and that it's hurtful to write a journal entry about what we just talked about. So I get that. I'm not going to be like, you didn't do your therapy homework and you suck. You're never going to be anything in life. Like, that's my trauma informed way of saying, I get it. That was a hard assignment. Let's talk about why that was so hard. Let's process that, right? And most therapists would do that. Being trauma specifically trained means that there are different things that I do that really always look through that lens. And so the way that I work is going to be very targeted for what someone comes to me with. And those are questions you can ask when you interview a therapist.
And also, Ms. Christian, I just want to add in. So this call is mainly filled with students without parents here. And so is there a way, how would you suggest, we are recording this, so we'll be able to provide this to also, we have amazing adult leaders already on here jumping in, just encouraging. But how do you think they can get their parents involved? Because of course you can't sign up for a therapist without your parent giving you permission. So how do they help bring their parents into that conversation?
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to first evaluate the way, like your relationship with your parents and or a trusted adult, because you might have to take the back door. I've had people who says, I talked to my church leader. I talked to Miss Rashonda because I know she's a trusted leader in my life, or the other leaders you have in your group here. If you don't have a great relationship with parents, and really kind of brainstorm and even practice. I've done some role plays before with the kids at my church who are rising seniors. And so we've had to practice how I'm going to talk to my mom about this, because a lot of what you may experience, I want to say up front, preparing yourself for rejection is what it's going to feel like. It's going to feel like rejection, like your mom saying, you ain't depressed, child. You ain't got nothing to do. Go sleep in the house. That's, what most parents would do. But I will say that when I talk to the parents of these children, they notice the difference. They just don't want to admit it. So if rejection is what you feel at first, I would encourage you to keep pushing and advocating for yourself and saying, no, this is a real thing. Like, I have thought about hurting myself, or I have thought about smoking weed because I heard that's the easiest way to not even think about what I got going on. Like, mama, I'm serious. Grandma, straight up. Like, I'm not myself, and I'm feeling some type of way. Like, really stressing that. And again, like I was saying earlier, bringing facts to the table. I mean, research is showing that people my age, my generation, we are at like a place in life that none of y'all generation before us has ever been in. So, just really kind of painting that picture. But just don't forget about the other trusted people you have in your lives. And then suggesting that, can we go together to find a therapist? Just making sure that we're making it a family and team effort.
That's awesome. We have another question, and And it's a part comment, part question. So I'm losing interest in things is something that I worry about. I hold on to 3 things that I'm good at, which is cardistry and origami and video games. Is there something I can do to stop just thinking about those 3 things 24/7? And I'm guessing they're trying to say, how can they expand beyond those, focus on the 3 things that they're good at or that
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is why step outside of those things? If you like them and you're good at them, then why not just let that be your jam? You know what I'm saying? So I wonder if like you're judging yourself for only doing those 3 things. I said before, and I think that was Daniel. Is that right? Or origami, because I'm just going to remember that forever. That's something that my whole adult self I have not been able to bring my no, you're fine, my adult self for doing that, because I mean, I can't sit still and do that. You have a special gift. You know what I'm saying? So if you look at it that way and you're looking at it as something that is pretty rare, I mean, I think that's special. And it's something that you can hold on to. If you're thinking, like, on the other hand, if you're thinking obsessively that I cannot step out of these things, I do not have the skills to do it, I'm not good enough, then that would be a different story. And I don't know if that's coming through in your question. But if writing family, thank you. Use your talents. If that's it, and that's what you want to do, then fine. And you can just get even better on top of that. I think that life experience will show you more ways you can use those 3 core things to even kind of branch off and do other stuff. I will tell you that you're in a pretty good position to have mastered a couple of things and really kind of been into a couple of things, because there are people my age who are what they call jack of all trades, master of none. And that just means that they like to do a whole bunch of junk, right? But they ain't really good at nothing. So that's what I wanted to point out, is if it's those couple of things, then stick to that, you know? And again, going back to that question, are you thinking that you're not good enough, or are you fearful to try other things? Because that would be a different issue.
All right. Do we have any other questions here? Lots of.
I had a question.
Hi, Paul. What's up, Paul?
So, you know, some people can be like unconscious or like unknowing to them, you know, practicing these symptoms. So like, how would one go about diagnosing themselves if they were concerned, or like having someone else diagnose themselves if they were concerned about someone else?
Yep, that's a good question, Paul. Do you follow me on Couch with Christian? That's a random question.
Just recently, yeah. Yes.
I thought so. Hey, it's so nice to see. I was like, who is Paul? Okay. But that's okay. That's a good question. And the main thing would just be to read about it. Like, y'all are here today, so I've given you the symptoms, right? I literally went to Google and typed in generalized anxiety disorder. Or if all you remember is the word anxiety, type symptoms of anxiety, and you will find likely a top hit would be like DSM-5 or whatever. So the way that we diagnose in the DSM, it says, you know, a person has to meet 3 to 5 of these criteria to be officially diagnosed for at least 6 months, feeling these symptoms consistently. Like, it gives you all these nuances and stuff. And so once you read about it, and if you can check off any of these symptoms kind of going down the list, and you know that for at least 3 months, you've been feeling these things kind of off and on throughout the weeks, and that's how to say, you know, you're raising a red flag. So, and then I would say that just the fact that you're asking the question is probably a clue to say that, yeah, you probably got some anxiety kind of spiking, which is very typical. A lot of us are. There is a diagnosis in the book called adjustment disorder. And that just means that you've been dealing with these symptoms, maybe not for 6 months straight, but for about 3 months-ish, I've been feeling this. And it's ever since my grandma died. And I just haven't really been able to kind of get back on. But, you know, it hadn't lasted quite as 6 months. I kind of bounced back. I'm straight. I'm just adjusting, right? Like, that's what it's called, adjustment disorder. And they come with both depressed and anxious symptoms. So it's really just a matter of, if you want to compare what you've been feeling to the DSM-5, just see what matches and how long you've been feeling them. But I would say, as a clue, you've been feeling them. If you've been feeling them at all, then that's a great time just to say, okay, I need to try to address this. So I hope that answers your question. And of course, okay, cool. And you did bring up other people too. It's good to get an objective report. Maybe you ask a friend and say, bro, have I been tripping lately?
Yeah.
I have to do that sometimes. I got to be like, sis, am I bugging? Let me just run this by you. And then they'd be like, y'all, sis, I ain't want to tell you, but you know, you give people permission to kind of let you know what they've noticed. Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.